Hey there everyone, welcome back for another video. I'm Captain Beefy. This is the Game Vault, and this will be a discussion on the color purple and how it's a red flag in modern gaming. And I'm not talking about the Oprah Winfrey Danny Glover movie, I'm talking about the color itself. We're going to discuss the origin of purple, how the meaning of it has evolved, the psychology of the color, and how it's prominently featured in several recent games that share a common denominator. Now let's cue up the music and we'll get right to it. The color purple is a red flag when seen in video game marketing these days, and the more prominent it is, the more concerned you should be about that game. What it represents in modern times is far different than what it was once associated with. Let's talk about the origins of the color real quick, and then we'll see where things changed and how we got where we are today. Around 3,000 years ago, the ancient Phoenicians uncovered a method to create a rich purple dye that became more brilliant as it aged. For centuries, the purple dye, called Tyrian purple trade, was centered in the ancient Phoenician city of Tyre in modern-day Lebanon. It was originally extracted from a species of sea snail now known as Balinus brandaris, and it was so rare that it was worth its weight in gold. Now, to harvest it, dye makers had to crack open the snail shell, extract its mucus, and expose it to sunlight. Apparently, there was an exact amount of exposure time that was required, as the mucus would change colors throughout the duration until it became the desired shade of purple. It took as many as 250,000 mollusks to yield just 1 ounce of usable purple dye. Obviously, this caused clothes made from the dye to be exorbitantly expensive. A pound of purple wool cost more than most people earned in a year. This restricted its use to royalty and the rich, and the fact that it was said to resemble the color of clotted blood gave it divine connotations, which caused certain religious groups to gain interest in it as well. For a long time, it remained a color that was rarely seen on anyone save royalty and clergy, and it was also a color not even seen in nature very often. Few fruits or vegetables wear that hue compared to others. Finally, purple became more common in 1856 thanks to a chemist named William Henry Perkin. He tried to synthesize quinine while he was still in school. The attempt failed, but that failure turned out to be a success that accidentally created a new dye called malvine. This would quickly become known as mauve. Perkins immediately created a full method of sales and production for the dye, making this the first time in history that the color purple would be readily available to people other than the wealthy. Different colors bring about or are associated with different emotions in people. Pink is love, green is nature, white is purity. The psychology of purple is interesting and somewhat polarizing. It is said to bring out a calming feeling to those who observe it, but too much purple can be aggravating and cause feelings of frustration. This is fascinating because the balance of that color must be subjective to each individual. Purple, which once only symbolized royalty, stands for other things today: vanity, extravagance, individualism, and ironically, it represents pride, one of the 7 deadly sins. An unconventional color, it is often used to attract attention. The reality of it is that it is not an individual primary color, it is the combination of blue and red which represent serenity and aggression respectively. That may explain why people have conflicting reactions on how they observe the color and what emotions it stirs up in them. Purple is also the color of ambiguity, reflecting uncertainty. This is all starting to come together now. The color was prominent in the counterculture days of the 1960s, often depicted in artwork from that time and associated with LSD trips. In fact, the late great Jimi Hendrix wrote a song titled Purple Haze, and Deep Purple, one of the pioneers of heavy metal, was formed during that same time frame. Purple these days is often associated with the LGBT community. It is a symbolic color worn on Spirit Day. This day exists to show support for children who are bullied because of their sexual orientation. It's always about the kids, isn't it? Purple is closely associated with bisexuality, mainly due to the bisexuality pride flag, which combines pink, representing homosexuality, and blue, representing heterosexuality, to create that bisexual purple. The purple hand is another symbol used during parades, demonstrations, and I believe it's emblazoned on a flag. Long before the LGBT community took over the color, the feminists had adopted it. Purple is the official color of the International Women's Day, and it has its roots in the first wave of the feminist movements. The Women's Social and Political Union of England were the first to adopt purple, white, and green as colors for their protest marches in 1908. Purple represented loyalty and justice. The National American Women's Suffrage Association and the Congressional Union for Women's Suffrage followed suit and adopted purple and white, but replaced green with gold as their colors, symbolizing a beacon of hope. So what the hell does this all have to do with gaming? Let's take a look at some of the most recent games that have been released, the marketing, gameplay, game design, and see if there's any pattern to be found with these games. We'll start this with Forspoken, a 2023 action role-playing game that was released for PlayStation. Many of the promotional stills for the game feature the main character with a purple background. During the opening act, when she is drawn from our world into the magical realm, she's pulled through a magical purple portal and dropped into a world that is led by powerful women. Of course, our main character Frey is a black female, which is a recurring theme these days in gaming, so common that it's almost comical. She comes off as quite cocky and arrogant, a bit of a showboat, which really aligns with the whole purple vibe. Sadly, the game did pretty bad overall. An open world that was devoid of life and personality, a main character that was horribly designed and almost intolerable to listen to.
Okay, that is something I do now. I do magic, kill jacked up beasts, I'll probably fly next.
On Metacritic, it ended up with a disappointing 64 critic score and an unfavorable 4.2 user score, indicating that most people did not like the game for whatever reason. And Luminous Productions, the development studio behind the game, was dismantled and merged into Square Enix, effectively shutting it down after the failure of the game. The funny thing was that anyone who criticized the game online was immediately shut down by fans as a racist or a misogynist, the typical tactic of someone that lacks any counter-argument. Imagine that. Let's move on. Suicide Squad, Kill the Justice League, came out in 2024, and it went over poorly for many reasons. But boy, was it purple. The enemies in the trailer just oozed that color all over the screen, and it was hard to make out exactly what was going on. The reveal trailer tanked, and Rocksteady had to push back the release date. Nobody wanted a live service multiplayer hero, or in this case, anti-hero shooter game from the studio that gave us the Batman Arkham games. Nobody. But that's what they gave us. Not only that, but they did it in a way that took away the individual fighting styles from the characters, slapping guns in their hands, making it even worse. The game was widely criticized for being woke, especially considering Warner Brothers worked with Sweet Baby Inc., a gaming consultation company that is openly admitted to pushing for DEI aspects in gaming, such as giving a Nordic character in God of War Ragnarok a sub-Saharan makeover. Warner Bros. Games planned on supporting the game for several years with new content and characters being introduced regularly. They started with the Joker, who looked about as gay as he could, followed him up with an absolutely terrible Miss Freeze that looked like a non-binary butch coffee shop antique store owner in Greenwich Village, and each season pass brought less players back to the game, and after about a year, Warner Bros. Called it a day, wrapped up a story with the lame, "oh, they were just clones" plot twist, flushed $200 million down the toilet, and let David Haddad, the president of Warner Bros. Interactive Entertainment, gracefully take the fall for the failure of the game. This was after it pulled on Metacritic a 60 from the critics and a 3.4 from the users. Ouch. Now, while we're talking about live service games, let's discuss X-Defiant, a 2024 release from Ubisoft that, like Suicide Squad, underperformed and is being sunsetted in 2025. It too featured a lot of purple in the marketing and promotional materials, featuring purple-haired women, purple backgrounds, and more. Plus, it's from Ubisoft, a company that openly admits to practicing arguably illegal hiring and promotional practices that focus on gender, color, and sexuality rather than skill, experience, and merit. This is the very core of DEI at its worst, and it's no wonder that their games are a mess on release. Buggy and sometimes unplayable. Full of modern-day social politics that detract from gameplay itself, especially in games that take place in historical settings. Rumors of the game underperforming were met with harsh words from the developers a couple months before Ubisoft announced that the game was going to be shut down and refunds were being issued. As expected, Metacritic scores were not stellar. The critics gave it a mediocre 67, but the users, the ones who actually play the game, gave it a bleak 4.7, spelling out its doom. The fallout for Ubisoft has been tremendous, but it cannot be placed at the feet of this game alone. Over the last several years, Ubisoft has had several games underperform or flat out fail, both single player and live service. In addition to X-Defiant and the controversy surrounding their upcoming Assassin's Creed Shadows games, things are not looking better for the embattled studio. They're on the brink of bankruptcy and facing several unpleasant options to stay afloat. Since January of 2023, they've laid off over 1,100 employees and have had to shut down studios just to stay afloat. A healthy company does not do this. Concord was going to be Sony's Star Wars in the mind of Herman Hulse, who was, at the time, one of the CEOs at Sony Interactive Entertainment. He believed the game, a live service hero shooter that featured personal pronouns, abysmal character designs, and uninspired gameplay, was the first step in a new universe that would span movies, television, games, and other media. Instead, it lasted 10 days, never broke 700 concurrent players on Steam, was pulled from the PlayStation Store, refunded, the studio closed down, and the game shelved. They even made a special PlayStation 5 controller for the game that I wish I'd purchased now that the game is such a legendary failure. People are selling it for well over its original value all over the place. Anyway, purple wasn't a huge factor in the marketing, but it was very prominent in the character designs. Critics gave it a 62 on Metacritic, but the gamers? Oh boy, a 1.7. That's brutal. This game arguably cost Sony $400 million to make if you factor in the cost of buying Firewalk Studios and the additional work they put into the game. That much money and about 8 years of development for a 1.7. That's 0.21 per year of development for you math guys. Now let's talk about BioWare and their recent abomination, Dragon Age: The Veilguard. If purplist was a word, I would use it for the marketing of this game. It's everywhere. This is a game that took 10 years to develop. The last entry in the series sold 12 million copies in its lifespan. BioWare expected to sell 3 million copies out of the gate with this entry and end up selling about 10 million overall during its lifetime. Instead, they said they engaged 1.5 million players, which is an ambiguous number that doesn't tell us anything about how many people bought the game. Dragon Age Veilguard is a dark fantasy game with dwarves and dragons and the like, but it features a companion character who has a subplot focused on how they are non-binary, and yes, they use that actual term. There's zero nuance. There are scenes of that character coming out to the character's mother over a meal. There's a scene where a character misgenders them and has to awkwardly do push-ups as a penance. The list of cringe goes on.
Whatever the reason, we made it through. And this time, no dragon escaped.
Thanks to Tosh.
That's why we recruited her.
Actually, Tosh uses them for themselves now.
They asked us to let folks know, so now you do.
Yeah. I appreciate it. Thank you for telling me.
In addition to that, there are top surgery scars available for the female-to-male trans characters in the game, the option to become trans, which opens up different dialogue choices. Are you getting the picture yet? Now here's the shocker. The director is a male-to-female trans guy. He jumped ship recently and landed with another company under the pretense of exploring new options. That's corporate talk for getting fired, but the company is letting you keep your dignity so they can save face and not have to admit what a complete and utter mistake they made in hiring you. BioWare also let go some of the writing team and others, a total of 50 people. The game never had more than 90,000 concurrent players on Steam. It underperformed even my low expectations, and BioWare immediately abandoned all plans for DLC and support other than performance and bug fixes. Now let's get to the funny part, the Metacritic scores. Critics, or as I like to call them, shills, gave it an 82, while players dunked on it with a 3.9. Many reviews used the exact phrase, a return to form, in their review, which made me raise an eyebrow as they heaped glowing praises on this garbage game. If you want to laugh, go onto Reddit and read the subreddit about the game. The cope there, it's astounding. So now let's talk about Avowed, the most recent game on this list. At the time I'm filming this, it's just coming out of early access. Critics gave it a solid 80 on Metacritic, but there's no user score yet. Once again, purple's in the marketing, and it's quite prominent. Obsidian, a developer known for making great role-playing games, rarely misses, so it will be interesting to see how this one fares. Out of all the games on this list, I think Avowed will be closer to the top of the heap as far as gamer ratings go. Obsidian recently removed the mandatory selection of pronouns, which was a step in the right direction, but that, I'm sure, is just a drop in the bucket as far as woke content in the game. Matt Hansen, the art director, has openly made racist comments and admitted to illegal hiring practices online and expressed a disturbing and unhinged personality that has made many gamers not want to support Avowed, myself included. So even if the game is good and the DEI impact is minimal, some damage has already been done. We will know more in the next month or so. I've heard a lot of rumbling from non-mainstream sources about Avowed, and they're not very impressed. There is definitely something here to tie all these games together and the prominence of the color purple. Is it an unconscious choice of people that share the so-called woke ideology because it calls attention to themselves, reflects their inner conflict, and how divisive they are? Vanity, extravagance, pride, these are all associated with the color, and very often these personality traits are seen in developers when they lash out at gamers who push back against their socio-political agendas when they are inserted into games. The average Joe is tired of being lectured and talked down to about concepts he cares nothing about, and he's starting to vote with his wallet. The list of failures is proof of that. The next time you watch a trailer or see an advertisement, watch out for this telling color. It will not always be an indicator that something is amiss, but as you can see from these examples, sometimes it will. It is not a coincidence. It's a pattern. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, and are there any games you can think of that I missed? If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like on it down below, subscribe to the channel for more content like this, and ring the bell so you know when I upload the next video. I'll see you next time. As always, I'm Captain Beefy with the Game Vault. Until then, peace.